Bretto, after 8 years of wellness summits, the 2021 Wellness Summit on Saturday, June 26th, will be our last one.
Last ever Wellness Summit. And this is not like the last ever Wellness Summit. This one actually will be the last ever Wellness Summit, Marcus Pearce.
Not a John Farnham last ever?
Not a John Farnham. This is it. This is going to be it. It's going to be massive. It is the last one after 8 years, after 9 summits. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a great opportunity to say farewell, to say thanks, to celebrate what has been an amazing Wellness Summit. But I think more importantly, a great time and a great opportunity to deliver some wonderful health and wellness content to the world at a time when I think they absolutely need it most.
Saturday, June 26th, purely digital event. There are no borders. Wherever you are in the world, you can join your favourite wellness couch presenters, Kim Morrison, Brett Hill, Jason Witten, Bridget Wood from Nourishing the Mother, Paul Thompson, Andrea Huddleston from Wellness Women Radio, Joe Witten, Cindy O'Meara, the entire Wellness Couch team. We cannot wait to join you.
And Marcus Pearce.
Marcus Pearce, that guy. June 26th, it's all day Saturday. It's one big wellness fest, $97, brought to you by Positive Mentor. Tickets and details at thewellnesssummit.com.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed, pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is the Body Love Review. So if you've been following along, you have just experienced 6 weeks of interviews with health professionals around a many and varied topic of how to love your body with greater reverence, depth and insight. So in today's podcast, we're going to give you the wrap-up of our highlights or our takeaways from each and every one of those 6 weeks, and as usual, wherever the conversation takes us. So if you're in for that ride, then strap on in. And before we do that, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email, and you are part of our virtual community where we send you an email every so often that keeps you in the loop of everything that's going on so you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper.
Yes. So this review, I've been thinking about this wrap-up conversation knowing that we were going to have it as we've been moving through the weeks, and it's been such a personal journey too. I feel like us going through these topics and not only having these conversations for our listeners, but also seeing where they land within ourselves and what they stir up, because, you know, we've both been quite vulnerable at various points on our own journeys and our own stories that these convey, and then also where our work is too, because like anything body love, you just get taken to deeper and deeper layers of where the work is.
Yeah, I think loving our body is a lifelong journey and experience because it's in a continuous phase of evolution, no different to our psychology. So it's always an unfolding universe, I think. As soon as you think this is as good as it gets, you realise there's this whole other layer and deepened experience. So I think it's a lifelong relationship, which is why it's such a valid conversation to be having.
It really is. And so our first interview was with Bonnie Bliss, and it was all about body image in the bedroom, which was juicy.
Well, my takeaway from our conversation with Bonnie was just the reflection and the reminder that we all block our own pleasure.
Because we're almost putting in the way of our experience how we think somebody might be perceiving our body, so therefore we're not in our body anymore.
Yeah, but then all the micro ways just during the day that you say no to pleasure rather than yes to pleasure. So I'm sure it was only a micro point of our entire conversation, but if we're talking about takeaways, that was my one that I was like, yeah, I really love having that front of mind, because I found myself since having that conversation with her just literally going, oh, look, I just blocked pleasure then, or I just said no to pleasure, or I could have said, and instead, like, just having an awareness of having that filter, I feel has actually been really impactful. Like, I just really loved that remembering and reminding of how we choose to block pleasure rather than always trying to seek for it. We're blocking it in how it's already existing in your world. That was my takeaway from that one.
That's an interesting flip, isn't it, too? Because it's like, we can so often seek for that thing, thinking it's this, hard thing to get outside of ourselves. But what if it's already there? We're just not actually allowing ourselves to feel it.
Yeah.
That's the takeaway.
Yeah. What was your takeaway?
I've been sitting with what she was saying around her, she was talking about her stomach and that being an area for her of tenderness, really, around how she felt in the bedroom, and my own journey with that, with this hernia that I've got, and how I know that I kind of carry kind of shame around it, or awkwardness around being seen in that part of my body. So I've just been really present to where I observe myself versus being embodied in the bedroom. Yeah. Where I make that flip between being in my body and feeling in my body, and when I flip out of that and I'm actually observing myself so that I'm not embodied anymore. So that was one for me that I've just been like playing with, which was really helpful, because
so helpful. I love yeah.
We kind of can't remind ourselves enough that
exactly.
Like your thoughts about your body and not you in your body anymore. Like
yes. Isn't that so profound? I actually really love that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so our next interview was with, I don't know if I've got these in order, actually, the way I've written them down. Who was our next one?
Who was next? Wasn't she next? Yeah, Charmaine Newmark. We went through sort of pregnancy-related nourishment and connection, change and morphing of the body, and we talked a lot about what it is to be intuitively led with our diet and our food, and comfort food eating with choices that might be more nourishing or sustaining for you. So we kind of went on quite a loop conversation with really, like, we went broad. I covered a lot of topics rather than honing in on one specifically. But what I really loved about that one was actually on the topic of the comfort food was the concept of neuroregulation that we really talked about in that sometimes that seeking for salt or for crunch or for whatever is the best you can do to regulate your nervous system in this moment, and that's not something we have to judge, that can be something that's healthful and beautiful because it's offering yourself the best nervous system regulation you can in this moment make. So that was my takeaway from our conversation with Charmaine.
That was actually the one that landed for me the most too, because I've heard that before so many times, but actually to have that as part of a conversation of rewriting our relationship with food and kind of dismantling the layers of like right and wrongness that we have around food, because I have a lot and they come out in triggers with my 4-year-old, to actually recognize, oh my gosh, again, like what if they're choosing, like what if I'm choosing or they're choosing that food because on some level their nervous system is wanting what that food gives them. And therefore, who am I to judge and get in the way of that attempt to regulate with my like rules, which are just really like constructs that we've come up with about, you know, good food, bad food, sometimes food, junk food, healthy food, you know, all of these beliefs that we have. And so I thought that was a really beautiful example and reminder too.
I love that you've looped it back through encouraging, because there's still something in me that like goes, I'm still really uncomfortable with that. You mean like totally trust them with their diet and their food choices? Like this,
but I can't, and that's my problem. Like my 4-year-old is like, I get like full on like can't control myself, like wanting to control her food when she tries to get too much of something. Like she'll, you know, like get 2 pieces of bread knowing, and I know she'll only be able to eat one, or she'll fill her bowl with yogurt and only be able to eat a tiny bit. And I haven't distinguished whether it's epigenetic, depression era, like food wastage stories, or if it's, you know, I don't think it's like fat shamey stuff. I don't think it's that. Or if it's just over controlling, you know, like I feel out of control, so I'll control this. I haven't picked the nuance for me around what that is yet, but that relating that back to my children was a good reminder, because I'm pretty on the ball with recognizing kids' attempts to self-regulate, but hadn't always looked at it with food and how the food serves that.
Yeah, super powerful. Super powerful. So then I think we have Chloe next?
Chloe next with training the postpartum body. What landed with me for that was, you know, our cultural construct, you know, or this kind of super mum-esque pinnacle that the modern woman's trying to search for, which is, when can I get back to my running? My doctor said at my 6-week check I'm good. Chloe really brought in this, like, no, like your restorative process takes 6 months, and it's micro movements and listening deeply to your body and bringing in the, you know, the dynamics as well about the sleep you're getting. Because I doubt that that's a conversation that practitioners are having with women around the fact that biologically normal sleep for babies and toddlers is waking a lot. So how is that affecting you? That's kind of not in the conversation. So I loved how women-centered her focus was for really honoring that postpartum time in your body and all the work it's done and all the work it's still doing to find its new alignment.
I just love everything you just said. But I also, as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that was totally, I loved that one too, that we need to alter our daily activities or expectations based on how much can you restore that night, how much restorative, which needs to be deep level sleep, are you going to get that night, and therefore how much of your musculature or body or whatever can you tear during the day, knowing that's going to be repaired.
Going to repair, yeah.
And if that sleep and restoration phase is less, that does need to impact and be a consideration in how you're moving and the expectations you're putting on your physical body during the day. I just, like you, really loved that lens of it's not just you like you were before, and it's not like any other human. You are literally getting potentially very few deeply restorative phases of sleep in your night, depending on how much your child is waking.
Yeah.
But we sort of tend to sweep over or gloss over the sleeplessness and the chronic sleep debt that mothers in particular build their child raising, birthing years.
Yes.
It is not like anyone else is functioning. So I can remember having deep rage at anyone, including my partner, that would say they were tired. I'm like,
you don't know what tiredness means.
I'm so grateful I did a family dinner or something. And my sister-in-law has no children, would be lamenting on how tired she is and blah, blah, blah. And I like wanted to stab her with my I remember driving home, ranting like a lunatic to my husband, and he's like, seriously, Jules, someone else gets to feel tired too. Yes, you do. And the conversation needs to be how much we're asking mothers' bodies and psychology to do without any additional support.
And I mean, how much was that anger that you had, you know, an aspect of you feeling so unseen, like the tiredness of mothering, feeling so unseen, which is what it is. Yeah. And also the process with the postpartum body too, of the fact that your organs, your internal organs have reorganized themselves around a 2 to 5 kilogram baby for the last however many months. Like, there's a process of gentleness that we need to offer for that woman that doesn't involve pounding the pavement as soon as she can.
Totally. It's a really good conversation, actually, isn't it? I love having this review. It's like taking me back to all the feels of those conversations. Yeah,
it's great, isn't it? And hopefully for our listeners, if you're like wanting to go deeper, then you'll go, oh yeah, I need to listen more to that one, or I need to go back to that one that I missed. So we hope that that's what this is offering you too.
So then we had Sally, who was the naturopath and skin specialist, who we talked about loving the skin you're in. And that was such a beautiful, like, the only reason we had that podcast even was because you and I were reflecting on how do we want this body love to look. And you were like, you know, this was a huge part of my experience of loving or not loving my body. And so that's how we opened up this conversation, because it wouldn't be one that would normally, I would have said, in context of self-esteem or body love being brought up. So I thought it was really powerful just even to go, you're right, this is the largest organ of the body. Let's have this conversation.
And it's how we face the world. You know, it's our most kind of exposed part of our body often, that it's how we're seen. And, you know, I loved that Sally shared her journey to her working in this area and how it came from that huge void of her own experience too, because I think for every interview every guest that we've had on, that personal story that they've been able to share has just had that resonance for me, and I'm sure for you too, Jules, around, yes, I see myself in that story.
Did it bring up feels for you? Did you find pieces of yourself that were validated or seen?
Yes. And I said on that podcast, like, you know, if only my mum had like this lens, you know, that actually it could have been an area that I could have reclaimed parts of more of myself or understood myself better had I known like the psychosomatic factors of why my skin was presenting the way it was in those teenage years, beyond just the hormones, right? Because it always just gets put down to hormones, but there's a bigger story to it. And I guess my heart also broke a little at, you know, how many parents find it really hard to see through that process with their teen, because we're so cultured to want a quick fix. And, you know, I was that teenager who just wanted the quick fix. I was that teenager that I just wanted to go on the pill because, of course, if that worked, well, then why would I do anything that's harder than that? I just want it fixed. So, yeah, I really, like, there was some tenderness for me in that conversation, but also a great amount of, I think, hope that there's different pathways that parents and teens and kids can go on if they're wanting to have a more holistic and kind of, I guess, embodied approach to healing.
So were there particular takeaways for you from that conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, for me it was definitely when my children get to that age, and if they're going through that, how much my stuff's likely to come up and how I can really be on the front foot of being present to my own stories and woundedness and not make it theirs, because I can see that it will be a button for me. And the foresight that this has been able to give me is really helpful to just tap in. Like, you know, I'm like you in the sense that I'm looking at the tweens and the teens and like the kids who are further, like who are older than my kids, and, you know, wondering like what kind of things I need to equip myself and them for those stages. And this was just another one of those conversations and insights that I've really taken on board.
That's a really beautiful lens to have though, isn't it? Like, forearmed is forewarned, or whatever that's saying.
Yeah, that's the saying, yeah. Forewarned is forearmed. Yeah.
But how beautiful to have these conversations now. They're kind of like pearls in your pocket, aren't they? Like,
yeah.
I'm no longer scrambling because I already told it this.
Yeah. And when I get to that point, I'll be like, oh, yeah, I've met this. Okay, I know a path that I can go down here, and that's priceless.
Yeah.
What about you? Did that, because I know it wasn't really a story for you.
No.
Was there something that came up in it that you
tried? Conversation. I was thinking mostly about, as opposed to self-identifying with that conversation, I was thinking, having my children front of mind, is thinking, okay, how am I entering this? How can I handle this? You know, how can I set them up? What are the conversations we need to be having? Like, I was really sitting in the, I suppose, the present, because that's where my two eldest children are. So I really enjoyed listening to both your experiences from the child as much as from the adult and professional. Like, I just thought you both gave a beautiful lens on being able to see both, because I find it easier to navigate parenting when I can have a deep understanding of the child's experience rather than my perceptions / projections of what I perceive in any moment. So I really loved the conversation from the point of vulnerability and thought processes of the child who's experiencing the skin condition. I really loved that. And I've actually been laughing at myself about my exfoliation addiction. So,
oh yes. Have you gone a little bit easier on that, Jules?
I've been less scraping my skin cells. This is interesting, you know. So actually, on a funny level, I kind of had that as a takeaway, was, okay, I'm actually destroying the integrity of my skin barrier, which creates further skin problems, rather than what I was assuming I was doing, which was just clearing all of the gunk out so my skin could be healthy. So actually having a realization that what I was trying to do was having the opposite effect. And how could I change that now? I actually found that really helpful.
Yeah, beautiful. And then after that one, is that everything? No. Loving your body through the fertility journey. Yeah.
Conception psychologist. Here was another one of your recommendations, because you had already been following her, loving her intersection of spirituality and physical body and medical background. Like, she was a fantastic meeting and merging. Were there favourite takeaways for you in that conversation?
Oh gosh, really for me it was looking at where you're going in, almost like, she didn't say these words, but what I saw was, you know, this kind of downward spiral of like waking up every day and feeling like, oh, I'm here, I'm still here, my body's failing me, and looking wider and seeing beyond the challenge that you find yourself in right now, which, I mean, I think this is a life lesson for everything, but certainly in that fertility journey where it can be so all-consuming that you want this thing so bad that nothing else in life, you know, can compare. And so what that brings up is an enormous amount of distortion of your capacity to feel and experience life. And so I loved that she really conveyed the value of finding other meaning beyond that, at the same time as being with all of those feelings and not dismissing them, because we all shared in that conversation all of the ways that we felt so failed by the medical system in meeting our grief and meeting our sense of loss. And in fact, I even felt like that conversation gave me, you know, the mother 9 years ago, or the mother to be 9 years ago, some sense of listening that she didn't get then. And so that was really a beautiful takeaway for me. And I think also too, just that sense of, oh, like, if only we could give this conversation to, you know, you and me, the women who were experiencing the miscarriage, or me as the woman who was experiencing secondary infertility, give this conversation to that woman and be in her ears right now at this time when she feels so isolated and alone. So it was really like, yeah, it really sat tenderly on my heart, but also hopeful as well.
I really feel that. I've actually got like full body goosebumps, even as you took us all on that journey. Then I really acknowledge all of that. Sometimes I think that what we've created, Bridgie, in this Nourishing the Model podcast, is like a meeting place or a category of options. Where can you go? Here's the directory.
Yeah.
You know, you're stuck. Here's the place. Now decide your journey. That was never around when you and I were going through.
Yeah.
Really, most of the aspects of our fertility journeys ourselves. There wasn't that one place.
No.
So I was just, even as you were saying that, and I was feeling the ripples, and I was having these flashbacks of all of these beautiful messages and emails that we get around, you will never know how much your podcast has changed my life. Pivotal in my life's journey and experiences. Like we really genuinely receive these incredible messages and emails that if we didn't receive those, we would never know. Like we conversation, and yet what we receive back is, this conversation changed my life. This collection of conversations changed my life. So as you were saying that, I was just kind of feeling the full body, just, you know, ripples of, yeah, we don't know how wide those ripples go, and how different our experience could have been had we had Nourishing the Mother as a space for ourselves to go to and to visit and to co-create or co-navigate an experience with. So the fact that it was missing for us, and as you've just articulated, that I really hope this is medicine for those who travel this path after me. Like, that's the whole point, isn't it?
It just comes full circle, and it's that real turning of wound into wisdom, right? It is that question that we ask each guest that comes on the podcast, is what that is for you. But I guess for you and I, like, this podcast is a collection of that.
Yeah.
Whole thing.
Yeah. I was really feeling into all of that as you were speaking then. It was beautiful. And even just the concept of focusing so hard on one thing that you're distorting the reality. You know, I think that's a profound learning and a tunnel that I think we could all travel down, depending on what it is that we're choosing to focus on, that we assume that our life would be infinitely better if we had, or like, I just think that that's a profound learning or awareness to bring.
Yeah, good.
I just loved the conversation that we had with Cass, just around all of just the emotional states and the roller coaster and feeling it and normalizing it. I still love the conversation around, are you creating space for that thing that you want to create? I do see that is, and you and I have spoken to many women who find themselves in this space, and when it comes to, but are you creating the space for that baby to enter? Are you creating the space in your mind, in your body, in your heart, in your womb, in your life, in your relationship, in your, like, are you actually opening up a space there for something to jump into it? Because if there's no space, there's nothing, there's no gap, there's nothing to be filled, right? So I loved the conversation around, are you creating the life, or can you witness blocks to what you say you want just by virtue of contemplating, am I creating the opening for this thing that I want? So I loved that from the conversation of a baby, because I find it really tangible in my mind. But even as we were just reviewing and you were talking then, I was like, yeah, you know, that's still my takeaway, even if we took it off of the lens of fertility or a baby creation, into, like myself, when you're beyond the years of creating a baby, what are you creating? Because it's still creation. It's still a fertility journey. It still involves, many aspects that we navigate through the creation of a physical human. And so I find all of those points really relevant. Are you actually creating the space? Are you allowing yourself to step into the human you are, the space you are, the way you function to have that reality, or is it lip service?
It's such a great reminder, because there's this really great book that I read a few years ago, which is called The Way of the Fertile Soul. And it was written by a fertility specialist called Randine Lewis, and she takes that really holistic view and works with a lot of women who are experiencing infertility, but that it really takes you on that journey to go, okay, well, what is there is fertility here if you want it. Are you embarking on the path of that, or are you closing yourself off to where it's present or where it could be? Because it can be a harsh truth sometimes, can't it? Like, I say the very thing I say I want, I'm blocking.
Yeah, right. That's exactly it. It's far more articulate than what I was saying, but that's what I was feeling in my body.
Which can be like really hard to sit with and be with and go, oh, like it's like my mouth is saying one thing, but my whole life is demonstrating another. Yeah.
I think it's something for all of us in that.
Yeah, me too.
Conversation we have is central around babies, but that is
but in what area of your life is that true for you right now? Like, because it'll be for all of us in some way, and it's that classic fantasy. You know, like we're running a fantasy because it's just a wish until you actually show the evidence that you're creating space for that or you're moving toward that thing.
Yeah, exactly. So there were so many, I guess, which is perfect because Kat was certainly talking about fertility and conception from the point of a holistic or spiritual overlay. So I think as I look through the concepts that we discussed in that, there's so many, I'm like, yeah, that's so relevant just to life. So I found that a really nourishing conversation as well.
Yeah. We would also love it as our listeners are kind of following along. If there's something that really landed for you, like we'd love you to share it with us. Like, you know, jot us down an email or contact us on socials because we really create these conversations to touch you and take you deeper, and like they've taken us deeper. And we would so love to continue that conversation with you too. And you know, we'll certainly be having that in Soul Driven Motherhood.
Yeah, it was incredible. So I suppose to wrap up, it would be really beautiful just to reframe on where you find yourself 6 weeks later with your own body love and perception. Has that changed for you?
It's really made me more contemplative of, oh, hang on, we think we forgot one. We forgot body positive parenting.
Oh my God. Sorry, I skipped over Chloe.
It's over that one. Which that's
oh, how could we miss that one?
How could we miss that? It's like a really big one.
I know.
Yeah. So positive parenting.
Firstly, her accent. Oh
yeah, her accent. We said to her after we stopped recording, I said to her, I just want to hear you say health like over again. Gosh, what was my key takeaway? Just really realizing how thick and deep and heavy our conditioning is around bodies and how easy it is to pass comment on bodies and how we all do it in various ways and how our kids are listening. And so it really got me to think about, like, what's my family narrative around bodies? What's my husband's narrative around bodies and body shapes? And it's kind of confronting to realize what you come with and what still gets perpetuated around you, and then how you therefore want to take that forward.
We didn't touch on that in the podcast because I know we didn't have time, but I was wondering about you because I know your husband has a different narrative to the one that you have and that consciously and unconsciously struggles with. So having that conversation, that awareness, did that start to shift or bring awareness to narratives or conversations or, I don't know, ways of being or belonging within your own family unit that you were like, oh, that thing.
Yeah, I think for me it really helped me see that there's conversations I need to have with him around how he makes, like, his father's body equate to his father's inability to be present or inability to be a good father, you know, or inability to have a deeper connection with him, because he's made his father's size be like, you know, the reason why his father couldn't or can't, you know, have a full life, right? But yet if we consider that all body types are functional for that person and that their body is exactly the way it needs to be for them, and throw out the rules that say you're obese or you need to get more fit or you're unable to move well now because of your size, and instead consider that how is this expression of this body love? I think it creates greater softening in me and greater kind of like pulling at the threads of the stories that I've become a part of as a result of our perception, you know, our perceptions around bodies. And too, conversely, I see how it really serves my husband, because he sees that, and he is a really pretty fit mid-40-year-old, because he doesn't want to have the mobility issues and the challenges that he sees his own dad having. So I also see how is consciously or unconsciously that presentation that his dad has, loving his son, but just in a different way, you know? So I think it just really helps me, like, check my projections and let go of, like, self-righteousness or just having answers, because we just don't.
Yeah, me too.
So that's probably my big takeaway, and then just really being aware of, like, the dialogues that my kids are around about bodies and how we talk about their bodies. I mean, we don't pass judgment, I don't think, but they're growing up in spaces and places where that's going to happen. And so how do we meet that in a way that feels respectful to all bodies and everybody being safe here?
Yeah. Yes, I just loved that. It's because it was so stark and clear in that podcast around how we all have a narrative and feel quite freely comfortable in commenting and passing shame or judgment, or even just focus on a physical body. I loved how stark and clear that was in the conversations with Cliona. Like that was, I love that.
And she's just so unapologetic about, like, this is the boundary.
Yeah, I thought it was super clear. I really loved that as well. Actually, I loved all of that, but the takeaway for me was the realization that I can advocate within the medical environment for my daughter.
Yes, I actually loved that came up for you in that.
I literally felt like one of those moments where I wanted to, like, smack myself in the head and be like, duh. It's like the thing, you can't see your own stuff.
Yes. Which is funny, because usually you'd be the first to be, like, advocating, right? But, like,
but because I have the health lens, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand what you're saying. I'd be focusing on that too. I'd be looking at that too. So from a health provider perspective, I really get it. So because it was, I guess, contextually framed within that environment, I wasn't taking it upon myself to advocate in a way that I might if it was outside of that context.
Yes, yeah.
If it's outside, because in that context, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm not listening to you, but I get it. Some people are having this argument with you. You do what you want to do. I don't fucking care. I'll just do what I want to do anyway. I was kind of in that point. But what I'm missing in all of that is that my daughter is in the room listening. And that even though it's a health professional saying these things to me, it could absolutely come from her own personal wounding, because it's quite forceful, versus it coming even from a health perspective.
Yes.
Because if it's coming from a health perspective, in the way that this is why I roll my eyes, is because she's still coming from a BMI. And it's so fucking ridiculous. I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
But if she actually had a lens other than, look, she also specialises in diabetes. So I think for her it's coming from a very particular lens around children, because her specialty.
And being at risk.
And she's seeing longer term, bigger health impacts from obesity. So I guess in my own mind I could rationalise and understand where she was coming from. But so that's why I kind of just let it go. But what I missed in all of that was I still have a right to say, you don't get to talk about these things, and you do get to talk about these things. This is what we work on. I understand that's where you're coming from, but here's how we're going to be running these, and actually managing the conversation rather than being led in the conversation.
And, also here's what we're going to talk about in front of my daughter, and here's what I want to have when she's not talk about when she's not in the room. Yeah.
So actually that was, like, painful. And also at the same time, I was completely ready to hear that message and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, of course I can advocate. Of course that conversation's going differently next time I see her. I may even write a pre-email before our appointment and say, look, just on reflection, these are the things we will and won't be talking about. I don't know that she's going to read it anyway, but I really loved the reminder on even in the context of medical system or environment, advocacy around body weight is still absolutely important, if not essential. So for me, that was actually the biggest takeaway from the conversation with Cliona was, I guess, my own, I don't know, kick up the butt a little bit.
And I also wonder too, for our listeners, that whether for those who might be pregnant or on that kind of journey, to also extrapolate out and see that this intense focus the medical system also has on pregnant women and BMI and, you know, all of these things is also questionable. Like, you know, we can also push back on that, and that hopefully this gives you permission to explore that within yourself and within the other relationships that you have more deeply.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big podcast.
I know, it's huge. I mean, like, just one topic can be like massive, and we've covered 6, so okay, it's huge.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. I would love to hear how you as the listener have been impacted by the last 6 weeks. If you can recognise from when you began that 6-week journey to where you are 6 weeks later. I would love to hear the differences and the changes, because I don't think you can hear things like we discussed in the podcast without it changing from something that was subconscious to something that becomes conscious, and therefore
that's probably the biggest thing, is that subconscious, like, little kind of like, it just really touches in these places we didn't know we were still harboring stuff. And that's what's come up in Soul Driven Motherhood too. It's been within our community, women going, oh my God, that's me, or wow, I didn't know I had this story on that. And then you get to excavate it and find a different like pathway out of it. Like, it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
oh gosh, I'm still just like being with the enormity of it all. With the enormity of like
this is why I love doing your review, because it's so funny. Like, you just swipe it away when after you listen to it, and you often just doing a review makes you go, oh my gosh, look how much I've traversed.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything more on it, but I mean, of course, if we went back to all of them and, you know, listed them all again, we'd find something else, right? Because they've all stirred stuff in us. But no, I just would really love to offer our listeners to go back and catch up on the ones you might have missed, and just really sit with what they bring up in you for your own experiences, and where they kind of call you forward, a little bit like Jules or like me with my conversations, what they're calling you forward to address or move through or highlight or heal. Yeah, that would be my offering. I
love that idea. What is it that you've been called forward with? How does it move forward? What a beautiful question.
Thank you. Anything that you'd like to offer?
No, I'm just sitting in the feels of that, because it really, each conversation calls you forwards. I just
and to look at it that way, then I guess it means there's such richness there for us if we go, wow, it's calling me forward.
Yeah, and it also just reduces that. Like, even if I put that on, because I still feel like the ouch part of me that feels like I've let my daughter down or not, like I could easily move into a shame or a guilt spiral around what I've done or not done in the context of body weight with Lola, in the context of this health professional. But even just having the framework of how does this call you forwards allows me to feel it, but it also allows a little bit of a lessening on the intensity of shame or guilt. So I just love that. So more I was just feeling into, that actually feels better when I frame it in how does this call me forward.
I love that, because it means you're not going to get stuck in it, right? It's not saying don't get stuck there, don't get stuck in a sludge or the heaviness. So how is it pulling you to where you want to be, where you want to go? Yeah, beautiful. So yes, if you want to, there's also obviously workshops associated to each of those podcasts. So if you are wanting to dive deeper with any of those guests that we had on, then you can join Soul Driven Motherhood at nourishingthemother.com.au. And we'd love to have you in for the replays of those if you are interested. And to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love,
and me is bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavour to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.